Hey all, this is just a quick video, quick by my standards anyway, given the hour-long ones I've been doing. I did a reading on Instagram yesterday, with this set of cards. This is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot, and I chose this deck because I haven't worked with it, but the reading was about how sometimes you have to go deeper into the darkness to find light. And that's how I've been feeling in the past few days, is that I don't want to come out of the darkness in a weird way, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. So sometimes you have to go deeper into the dark in order to find out, what is going to get you to the next phase. There's a there's a line in Hamilton that I love. Sometimes you're in so deep it feels easier to just swim down. I think sometimes you have to swim down. So that's what this reading did, and the cards didn't have any set positions. It just sort of in rows, sort of drilled down. That's actually not the point of this, though. What I wanted to talk really quickly about, because I thought it was interesting, was the top row was the Moon, the Six of Wands, and the Wheel of Fortune. And what I wanted to do was talk about how the Six of Wands in this case didn't become its usual meaning. It became kind of a carrier, like a, I'm trying to see, now that I'm doing this video, I'm not going to remember the word. It becomes like a connector, almost like a verb, but the meaning of the card doesn't matter as much as what happens in the card. And this is a time where the meaning of the card got overshadowed by what the card was doing. So the Moon is always a card that I have an interesting time interpreting, but in a reading about darkness, I thought, oh gosh, how could you start anywhere else? You know what I mean? Because there is, and actually, as you sort of get deeper into the reading, it does seem to sort of focus on this idea of moving on, and it seems to get darker to the point where you have to move ahead. But again, that's not the point. We start with the Moon. And when the Moon is out, we're not completely in the dark, but the light that's there is reflected. And what we're not seeing is the reality of situations. There's an illusion there. And because we can't see clearly, we're really at the mercy of our instincts. And then the card at the end of the row is the Wheel of Fortune, which is about cycles of life, and in this case, I think sort of the fates, the sort of inevitability of some situations. But in the center of this, we had a card, the Six of Wands, that's traditionally associated with victory. In this case, just full disclosure, what I was reading about here was my feelings after the election. And so, victory has been something that's been on the forefront of my mind. But what this card became in this reading for me didn't have anything to do with victory, but of this moving into this. So the sort of, if we're talking about going into the darkness, sort of the Moon, the darkness of the Moon card, experiencing the Moon card, and then traveling and making the choice, making the active decision, because wands are very active, to explore the twists and turns of life, and to recognize that this is a downturn for me. This is like at the bottom of a cycle, So in a way, there was this motion of darkening, of going from like the slim light of the Moon and making the choice to sort of go into this idea that things are out of our control sometimes, and we are at the mercy of the fates, so to speak, to sort of put it in that way. So the victory, there was this idea of victory causing me heartache. But in that, it was this idea of this darkness traveling into a surrender of inevitability, a surrender of things being uncontrollable and out of our control, which I thought was really interesting. So in this case, the Wands card the Six of Wands became less about sort of this sense of victory and triumph, but about traveling in and sort of going to battle, going to face the Wheel of Fortune energy. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, that just came from really sitting there and wrestling with the meaning, because I thought, God, that's such a positive card. The reading I'm talking about is darkness. What does that do? And one thing that we try to do as readers sometimes is make every card have its weight. But there's an expression in corporate America, which is that if everything's important, nothing's important. And I think that that actually is the case in multi-card readings sometimes. Not every card carries the same weight, especially when we've got major, major, major. There's also a sense with both of these cards, these two minors that are next to each other, the Six of Wands and the Knight of Cups. They're both moving, so they become less about the idea of victory or seeking romance, say, and more about just moving toward. You see that the Moon and the Six of Wands are both moving to the wheel. This is not my favorite in depiction of the Wheel of Fortune because I think it has nothing to do with the Wheel of Fortune. So if I were reviewing this deck, I'd say a lot of people like this card because, you don't have a tarot card in the tarot. I don't think that it's an appropriate interpretation of the Wheel of Fortune. But whatever, it's fine. You get to a point where you're always reading your meanings, but the directionality, Moon facing this, if you're curious, just to sort of share, the star became sort of by surrendering to that wheel, that cycle, and sort of knowing that things are out of your control, you begin to feel a little bit of a trickle of relief, and you start to feel a different glimmer. It's a dimmer glimmer. I'm Stephen Sondheim. It's a dimmer glimmer than the Moon, because to me the star is. They're spread out, but it's a direct light. Stars are not reflected light like the Moon is. So though you go into the darkness of surrendering to the fates, in that darkness you start to see the trickles of light. And in there you identify what you're going to go in search of, what you're going to start caring about. And you start to feel passionate and desirous of moving towards that thing, so you start to go hunt it. So once you surrender to this, once you go into that darkness, you start to see the star, you start to see little pricks of direct light that inspires you, and you suddenly see, you don't get the whole thing, but you start to feel, because the Knight of Cups is very emotion based, right? And he's acting based on feeling. You start to feel a sense of forward motion, and then in the Eight of Cups you're able to leave this all behind and figure out a new path and go forward. So by going into the dark, you're able to finally see a path forward. But what was most interesting in this reading to me wasn't interesting reading, believe me. This is one of those times where you do a reading and you're like, oh my god, this is so, this is the amazing thing about reading tarot. It's like in the days that I've been going through what I've been going through, the Three of Swords kept coming up as a way of saying you can't escape this. Like, this is something you have to feel. What was interesting to me in this reading was the Six of Wands, not with its usual meaning, but just being a carrier, like a my words have escaped me tonight. In musical notation, you have a slur, that sort of indicates that these notes are sort of blended together. Not blended, but they're played smoothly together. They carry the musician over the notes in a way. In this way, the Six of Wands in this case is not about victory. It's about this delivering this being here, moving through into that. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. The question, of course, is like, how do I know that? Well, you just sit with it and you figure it out, and you wrestle the Six of Wands. I mean, the Six of Wands is just not making sense for me here. What is it doing? Well, it's carrying me. In this case, it's carrying me forward. And interestingly, in this deck, this isn't a very victorious looking card. It's actually pretty, it's a bunch of skeletons and a knight going into battle. But that's why I chose this deck for this reading, because I wanted something dark. To talk about darkness. So this is where we get into intuition, and you just sort of realize that, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go that makes sense to me suddenly, that this is a carrier. It's a motor for this card. It brings it forward in the same way that this card sort of brings us down to the point of the triangle here. So I hope that makes sense. But again, this is one of those things that as you start to like surrender to the meaning, and you start to step back and not pressure yourself to get it right, and as you start to recognize patterns, you're gonna find that you do more and more of. And it should just come naturally. So don't pressure yourself to do this kind of thing. Don't go looking for it. It will come looking for you when you step back and just say, what is this reading telling me? Talk to me. You know what I mean? So let me know if this is helpful. Be good. And I'll talk to you soon.